Hey, what lurks beneath? So, even though I don't have my own stories to share with you, a lot of my extended family serves in the forest industry, and they've all shared with me some very terrifying, bizarre, and weird search and rescue stories. I've collected a handful of them, and I thought it would be fun to share them with you. You'll find these scary and interesting. I see that you already have a huge playlist of park ranger stories. While I can't actually verify any of them are true, I can stand and say a lot of these are from my family's own personal experience, since at least 3 or more of them are serving or have served in the industry for quite some time. Starting with my great-grandfather, who served for about 19 or so years before passing away due to an unexpected automobile accident. At the time, he was one of the main leaders of the search and rescue expeditions, and while many of the expeditions turned out normal, and they actually found survivors, there were a few times they found things that didn't quite fit this realm of normalcy. For example, one time, a woman had been reported missing. They found her about 9 miles outside of where she was last seen, except when they found her, they only found her lower half, exactly from her waist down to her feet. Everything left intact. Shoes on, pants on, everything was as normal. But she was cut in half, it appeared, by something surgical, is what they described. Blood had been clotted and coagulated. There was no extra mess, no guts, nothing. It's as if she had been taken and surgically cut in half with a laser, they said. Although the wound never appeared to be burnt or singed in any way, they found it weird that there was no bleeding out or any such sort. They never found her upper half, and again, no sign of roughhousing, no sign of foul play. Her pants were never stained with blood or ripped. It's as if she just fell in half, and her upper half just disappeared. What's weird is they found her up against the base of a small mountain, out in the middle of nowhere. She had been there for probably 2 to 3 days, and another very weird trait is that there had been no onset of putrefaction or death. There was no stench, nor were there any signs of bacteria growing on her that would indicate the buildup of gases or the start of decomposition. This also happened again about 2 years later when they found a young man who was about 15 years old who had died under mysterious circumstances. He was last seen around a trail, disappeared. They found him 3 days later, stripped completely naked, hurtled and huddled by a rock, having died due to exposure. Only thing is, the same concept. There was no onset of putrefaction or decomposition, and he wasn't mummified or frozen. His body was actually around 60 degrees temperature. There's no quite explanation for what happened. They're not sure if he got lost, ripped off his clothes and froze to death. Either way, just strange things. And the last story from my great-grandfather. This older man had also turned up missing. We're talking old, like 70, 80 years old. I don't exactly recollect if he was senile or not, but either way, he had gone missing. Well, search and rescue continued to look for up to 5 or 6 days, if I'm recalling correctly. Well, they never found a trace of him, but they found all of his clothes, his long johns, his underwear, his shirt, his pants, everything, in a pile, tattered and ripped up. No dirt, no blood, no signs of anything other than his clothes had just been clearly taken off and ripped up, by hand it appeared. Nobody's exactly sure what happened. There was search for prints or any other evidence, and none had been found. The odd thing about this one was, all of his tattered clothes were found in a neat pile in the middle of a small clearing, about 7 miles from where he was found, north over a large ridge and through a small mountain and dense forest, somewhere he never would be able to get to by himself. Just strange things like that make you think and stay up at night, wondering, what if? Now, moving down the family line, my grandfather also served in honor of his father. He too had bizarre and similar circumstances to experience. While he never led search and rescue expeditions or found people's lower halves missing, what he did find or experience was equally disturbing. On several accounts, as he was doing his rounds, he would always claim that he felt like he was being stalked or hunted by something or by multiple things, if that makes any sense to you at all. He said there were certain parts of the park and the forest that he just could not go into because this strong, overwhelming feeling and sensation of utter and complete doom. On other such occasions, he had had rocks pelted at him, logs thrown in his direction from downhill. Things like that. Screaming, wood knocking, all sorts of bizarre stuff he couldn't rationalize. And his scariest sighting being as he was driving, on his left, in a clearing, he saw these two large black figures walking off in the distance on a hill, right along the tree line. He pulled out his binoculars and looked, and he told me he could never make out details because they were so dark, so incredibly black, but assumed that they had dark fur from head to toe, and that they were walking like large giant men. Two of them following, all the way riding the tree line, to where when they reached the end, they casually walked in the woods. I believe at this time, this was before Bigfoot, so a sighting like this didn't really have any answers, to my knowledge. Either way, it freaked him out, and by far, the most disturbing is when an incident happened very close to the main base, or the main area of a park. I don't really know what they call it. Home base, the main office, so excuse me for my incorrect terminology. But apparently, a man had had his arm ripped off, and luckily was found before he ultimately bled out. How he was found in time, I'm not exactly sure, but from what I understand is he was close enough that he was luckily discovered by other colleagues. Well, he was unconscious already due to blood loss, and if I'm recalling correctly, nearly died. But once he got blood in him, and they were able to resuscitate him, he claimed that he was attacked by what he calls a large bear man, and he said that this bear man tried to attack him, grabbed him, and pulled his arm off, and said that this bear man had such great strength that for it was like ripping up a piece of paper. Effortless. The only details he can give is that it was tall, covered in hair, had really big hands and feet, and a very ugly, scary-looking face. That's all the details my grandfather was able to extract from the man. He ended up living, but that's about as far as I know of that story. This all took place in the 60s and 70s from what I can recall. Then, one of my cousins also pursued the park ranger industry, and he too had his own fair share of weird, bizarre, disturbing experiences. Now, my cousin has had the most experiences, in my opinion, or at least has had the most amount of stories to share. And even though he didn't deal with quite the things my grandfather and great-grandfather dealt with, his own experiences are just as equally disturbing as the other two. His, though, involve a whole different realm of seeing lights, hearing strange noises, feeling sensations, and other such things. And these have also occurred over the course of years. One experience that he recalls to me that's always shaken him is when they were in the middle of doing a search and rescue expedition during the nighttime. The small team he was working with was equipped with lots of lighting gear, flashlights, headlamps, extra batteries, things professionals would use to find their way around in the dark, with always bringing up backups. Well, instantaneously, everybody's flashlights, headlamps, just exploded. I'm talking glass and plastic shattering, and the lights going out. Nobody had nothing. They were stranded there in the dark. This all happened instantaneously. Even in the dark, as they were able to fumble around and pull out the backup batteries with what little moonlight they had, all the batteries were dead, including the tons of backup ones they had. This led to them having to stumble around and find their way back about 2 miles into the dark, which was tougher than you might think. Something he has no explanation for, since all of it happened in unison. He believes that it was some sort of magnetic wave, but what could possibly hit them and his team to make that happen? He's not quite sure. Other times when he's been by himself, He'll hear this incredibly loud humming noise, crescendo more and more in volume, and then finally just stop, instantly, as if it never happened. He equates the humming noise to asking me if I've ever been around a loud generator or an air conditioner, just a really loud noise. That's the best way he described it to me personally. He said it sounded like a generator, and it kind of had that electrical humming wire noise. He said it was without a doubt some sort of machinery, but couldn't quite place his finger on it. He said there's no reason that he should have been hearing that, out in the middle of the forest. There's no buildings or electrical wiring or machinery anywhere around, so he has no idea what to equate that to. Several other of his park ranger friends have also heard the same noise, randomly, throughout different times of day, in different locations, all across the park, on search expeditions and on not. He's also reported seeing strange flashes of light in the middle of the woods, mainly during evening, dusk, night, and the very early morning hours, just as the sun is setting or rising, or completely dark. It's like a camera flash, is the way he describes it, but much, much more brighter and stronger in intensity, and only lasts a split second. He has no explanation for that one either. It's almost an unnatural brightness, is what he described it. There's no camera flash in the world that has that amount of power or intensity. Think of like a really high-end spotlight, and have it flash and fill up an entire area for just a split second. He said that's what he sees, and while he hasn't exactly experienced this next one, many of his colleagues have. They've been out in the woods, and they hear their names being whispered by strange, distorted voices. They can't really pinpoint where the voices are coming from, because they claim, all of them do, that the voices appear to be all around them, above, below, far and close by. And it's not just one voice, it's a series of voices, all different tones, volumes, and pitches, all distorted sounding, whispering their name. This has happened multiple times, and has really, really creeped my cousin out. Even though it never happened to him, he says he has no explanation for any of these things, so that about covers that. I hope you enjoyed what I've shared with you today, and I'll talk to them more and see if I can't dig up any more stories from either of them. My great-grandfather passed a long time ago, but my grandfather, even though he's still alive and kicking, I'm sure still has a couple stories left. And my cousin, who isn't in the industry anymore, I'm sure still has some stories as well. Parts of my other family are currently serving in the industry too, but as far as I know, they don't have any stories to share with me that I'm aware of. But I'll go prodding around and see what I can't dig up. After all, it doesn't hurt. Anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed these stories, and just know that if you know anybody that does serve in the industry, I guarantee that they've had their fair share of strange happenings.